I played 30 games of Corpsicle Death Knight. I'm going to share with you everything that I learned along the way. This deck revolves around the Corpsicle card, so we want to make sure that we're generating lots of corpses to be able to get these back in our hand at the end of our turns. Miracle Salesman, really strong 1-drop. The Snake Oil as well is going to be good to trade and get us farther into our deck. Corpsicle itself, you want to keep in mind here, you can hit your opponent's face, you can hit their minions. We can even target our own minions, which is going to be important to keep in mind. Also keep in mind, if your opponent has a particularly threatening minion, you may need to play this even though you don't have enough corpses to get it back in your hand. It's going to be better to lose the card and kill that key minion in certain spots. Dreadhound Handler, one of the best 2-drops in the game. It has Rush. It's going to help us fight for the board early. The card overall is going to give us 3 corpses, and keep in mind this minion has the Undead tag as well as the Death Rattle minion with that Undead tag. Harbinger of Winter, I like it as a 1-drop. The only frost spell that's in the deck is going to be the Corpsicle itself. This is just going to give us an extra opportunity to be able to get at least one of those Corpsicles in hand. And again, we see the Undead tag here. Mining Casualties, again, one of the best 2-drops in the game. It's going to give us a total of 4 corpses. And it's going to be important to keep in mind here that the ghouls created by these Death Rattles also have that Undead tag. Speaking of Acolyte of Death, the reason I keep bringing up that Undead tag is because of this card. Friendly Undead dies, we draw a card. It's going to give us a lot of opportunities to be able to draw cards, make sure we have plenty of options in our hand as we play throughout the course of the game. Crop Rotation, it's going to be really good to help control our opponent's side of the board. These minions all have the Undead tag, which is going to give it synergy with the Acolyte of Death. Potentially you can use these as a combo to draw cards and fill your hand. One thing you want to keep in mind here though, the minions created by Crop Rotation are going to die at the end of your turn. Gorgon Zormu, also in the deck. It's just really good. This again is going to be 4 corpses. You get that cheese in your hand and those minions continue to get bigger. Just keep in mind the situation of the individual game that you're in. Sometimes you're going to want to play this card as 2, 3, 4 drops. Sometimes you may want to hang on to it and play it out with 5, 6, 7 drops, or maybe even more. Rainbow Seamstress, again, we have the Undead tag here for the synergy with the Acolyte of Death. This is just going to give us a little bit of healing and removal in the form of Rush. This is a rainbow deck, so it is going to have Lifesteal, Reborn, and Rush. Eliza Goreblade, it's just going to give a buff that's going to give all our minions +1 attack for the rest of the game. It's going to have a lot of synergy with things like Crop Rotation. It's also going to have synergy with Ghoul's Knight. Ghoul's Knight, again, can potentially just be a really powerful card. You play this on an empty board, all those minions will hit your opponent in the face. Of course, if Goreblade has died, this is going to be 2 attack minions, so it's like a Pyroblast you can hit your opponent in the face with. You can use it to clear your opponent's board. It has synergy with the Acolyte of Death to be able to draw cards. And importantly, these minions that are created will survive after the end of your turn, so your opponent's going to have to deal with them. Helia, I have a soft spot in my heart for this card. It may actually just be a soft spot in my brain, but I really like the card in certain matchups. Those decks like to draw a lot of cards, so being able to shuffle those plagues in can cause just enough disruption to be able to break up your opponent's game plan. Horizon's Edge, one of the best locations in the game. This card is going to be great. It has 5 uses. It's going to have a lot of synergy with cards like Ghoul's Knight and Crop Rotation, even the Mining Casualties, just because we'll be able to open it back up and continue to use this. You can potentially use it to clear your opponent's board. You can also use it to sneak in a little bit of extra face damage. Really, really powerful card. I'm also running Maw and Paw here. This is not a card that you're going to see in a lot of lists of Corpsicle Death Knight. I really like it as an anti-aggro card. You play this out on the board and it gives you corpses. If your opponent kills it, they've now spent 8 damage removing this minion from the board. That's potential damage that could have hit us in the face. And we've plussed in those 5 corpses. Or if they leave it on the board, it's going to give us 5 health. Makes it really good against an aggro deck. Your opponent's definitely going to react to it when it's down on the board. Thessarian, I feel like people are maybe sleeping on Thessarian here. It's going to be 2 corpses for this deck. It's damaged. The Death Rattle is good. The minion comes back. I really like Thessarian in the deck as well. Army of the Dead, again, just a lot of synergy with the deck here. Important to keep in mind, this does actually spin corpses, but we're generating so many corpses with this deck, it's usually more than fine to be able to play this and have enough corpses to be able to get Corpsicles back in our hand. Keep in mind, these do have the Undead tag, so they can also be combined with the Acolyte of Death to draw cards. And any minions left over are going to stay on the board. Primus also making the deck, the Titan, actually just really still a strong card. I find most often that I use the Rune of Blood to remove a big minion, or I'm using the Rune of Unholy. to be able to get those Death Rattle taunts in the way. Again, it's just going to be more corpses to be able to fuel this here. And also keeping in mind, Rune of Frost, I don't typically use it a lot, but it's going to make our Corpsicle potentially do more damage. Promise, definitely a strong card. Yogg Saron making the cut here. I would say the two most popular things that I'm going to do with this card is take control of an enemy minion. It's going to be extremely valuable if your opponent has a big or important minion on the board. And then also just using it as a board clear, force each enemy minion to attack one of the other minions on their side of the board. I really like the Yogg here. You can do some fun, interesting things with it. Ziliax, everybody's favorite robot, is going to be in the deck as well. I like this Ziliax with the ticking module, costs 1 less for each minion to keep it in play. And I played a lot of games with it with this perfect module, Divine Shield, Taunt, Lifesteal, and Rush. That's how I have it built currently. It gives you a taunt, it gives you a little bit of lifesteal to be able to fight against some of those aggro matchups. You could also consider using the module that gives your other minions +1/+1. There's going to be a lot of situations where we have boards like Crop Rotation, where that extra 1/1 can help us clear, or maybe you just have a big board of a combination of minions and do a lot of damage to your opponent's face. That's definitely an option depending on what you're facing. I'm seeing a lot more aggro than anything else, so I like the Taunt, Divine Shield, and a little bit of healing that goes along with it. And then rounding out the deck, we have Reska, the Pit Boss. This, of course, is going to allow us to steal one of our opponent's minions. Keep in mind here that you can use the Corpsicle on your Reska. If your opponent has one important minion, like a Ziliax of their own, and you would like to steal it, you can play the Reska, oftentimes for free, because of how many minions have been dying. And you can actually play the Corpsicle to kill it and steal their minion. So a couple of different uses for this card, just want to keep that in mind. And one thing that I actually didn't mention with the Eliza Goreblade, this is only 3 health. You can Corpsicle this as well. If this sticks on the board, you can hit your opponent in the face, Corpsicle it, and then allow your other minions some extra attack to either attack your opponent in the face or clear the board here. Important things to keep in mind. General mulligan for this deck, we're going to be keeping Salesman, Handler, Casualties, as well as the Gorgon Zormu. Against Death Knight, you're going to want to go with the General mulligan. This matchup really feels like it's going to be all about controlling the board. Every single Death Knight that I played was playing some version of Corpsicle Death Knight. Fight for the board aggressively. Every single match that I played, it felt like one player was really able to lock down that board and just start chipping away at their opponent's health total and then go on to win from there. I believe it's definitely going to be better going first than it is second. If you're going second, you're going to want to set up a really nice swing turn to be able to lock that board down. Against Demon Hunter, every single one of these was a Pirate Demon Hunter. I don't think it's a bad matchup at all. We are going to want to play a little bit more defensively. We're going to go with the General Mulligan, as well as keeping the Maw and Paw. Again, I like it against aggro, just because your opponent is definitely going to have to deal with it. We just want to make sure that we're clearing the board and removing those pesky pirates and taking as little face damage as possible in that matchup, and then start to look for lethal around the mid to late game. Against Druid, every Druid seems to be running some form of the Dragon package here. We should be able to get on the board early in this matchup. Very few early game minions from what I've seen so far. And so we'll go with the General Mulligan and look to start pressuring our opponent's health total early in the game. If you realize that you're playing against some form of combo Concierge Druid, once you see the setup come and you know that they're going to want to go for lethal, you want to be as wide as possible on the board. I find that you take a lot of damage from the drinks, which are potentially going to be free if that Concierge is on the board, and then with the spell power, it's just a lot of damage. We want minions on the board to be able to soak up some of that damage. Things like Primus with the Unholy Rune, maybe even the Ziliax, maybe just a wide board of like an Army of the Dead, really soak up some of that damage. Keep in mind those Druids are going to have access to 4 copies of Swipe, so you don't want to over-invest in any one board. Swipe, spell power, they'll be able to remove your board, so you want to be a little bit careful there. You don't want to throw away too many minions that are just going to get removed by a single swipe in that matchup. No Hunters on the ladder, it's a dead class. Mage, all of these mages are Elemental. Elemental Mage actually nerfed, the Lamplighter nerf definitely hurts. It's now 4 mana, it's going to slow down their burst. Again, in this particular matchup, we're going to go with the General Mulligan. I'm also keeping Maw and Paw in the matchup. You're going to want to play defensively, make sure you're not taking too much damage, again, because of the Lamplighter finish. Just fight for the board as hard as you can, and then chip away damage at their face when and where possible. Against Paladin, it actually felt like a really, really good matchup. Again, we're going to play a little bit defensively here. We're going to use the General Mulligan, as well as the Maw and Paw. We're going to want to fight for the board. Keep in mind, at 4 mana, potential Crusader aura is going to be coming down. You want to limit the number of minions that your opponent has on the board. You don't want them to be able to buff a whole bunch of stuff. And then also keep in mind they are going to have the Showdown Prismatic Beam combo to be able to build a board and wipe out our side of the board. Horizon's Edge ends up being really good in this particular matchup. It can help you keep that board clear, along with some of the cards that are creating lots of minions, especially Crop Rotation, Ghoul Knight, and the Army of the Dead. That can allow you multiple uses of Horizon's Edge in a single turn. So again, we're going to go General Mulligan as well as Maw and Paw. You're going to want to fight for the board and just play a little bit defensively in that particular matchup. Against Priest, not a whole lot of Priests out there. We're just going to go with the General Mulligan. We're going to attempt to pressure our opponent's health total and finish them off, hopefully somewhere around the mid-game with a combination of minions and just repeated Corpsicles to the face. Not a whole lot of Priests on the ladder right now. Same note to Rogue, not a whole lot of Rogues. I believe they are all what I would call Shenanigan Rogue. They're really just trying to win through means of hogwash, random card generation. I absolutely hate it. We go with the General Mulligan here, and we're just going to look to pressure our opponent's health total right off the bat. We're going to play more aggressively in this matchup. We're going to force our opponent to have to find things to deal with our board. Totally unfun. I hope you don't get Hearthstone in that matchup. Against Shaman here, I actually did not lose a game against Shaman. This is, of course, Pirate Shaman. All of these were. Again, we're going to play a little bit more defensively in this particular matchup. We're going to go with the General Mulligan as well as the Maw and Paw. Fight for the board very, very aggressively. And it's important that as you get into turn like 5, 6, and 7, we want our board to be as wide as possible because of the 5-mana Wave of Nostalgia. So if the Shaman plays Wave of Nostalgia, you want to make sure that you have the same number or almost the same number of minions on the board that they have when they play it. If you don't, you're going to lose. If you do, you're basically going to win. It's kind of like a Hail Mary that they're throwing up there to be able to try to recover at that point in the game. I didn't really have any problems with that matchup, but the Wave of Nostalgia is going to be a little bit of a danger point. And the games never really went long enough for the Windhorn, the Wind Fury weapon, to really be that big of a threat. Fight for the board and chip away at your opponent's health when and where you can. I only saw one Warlock. I believe every Warlock right now is playing Pain Warlock. Could be a good matchup for us, simply because the Warlock is going to be killing themselves. We are going to want to fight for the board early. They do have a lot of minions that can potentially be hitting the board, but they're also going to be damaging their own health total, which is going to allow us to clean them up, potentially with something like Corpsicles, maybe over the course of a couple of turns, as well as the potential for a Ghoul's Knight, being able to get these minions to hit our opponent. Keep in mind, these minions can bypass taunt. They're attacking random enemies. We're just going to go with the standard mulligan here and really just try to hit our opponent in the face. I don't think it's a bad matchup at all against Warlocks. Warrior, absolutely awful, awful matchup. What I found is I play minions on the board, I chip away armor, I chip away health, and right as I'm in a position to be able to set up lethal, the Ziliax comes down. The Warrior gets a lot of healing from the Ziliax. You can't target it because it has elusive, so you can't use Corpsicles on it. You gotta punch through it the hard way with your minions. Warrior gets a lot of healing, they're back up to full health, they still have removal and armor options from the cards in their deck, and then you see multiple waves of Ziliax coming down. It's just a really, really hard matchup for this particular deck. Mulligan in this matchup. I'm going to be actually keeping the Reska. I'm also going to be keeping the Yogg Saron with the plan of when the Ziliax come down, I need to be able to steal it before it dies because I don't want my opponent to really be able to resurrect it. I haven't had any luck with that strategy just yet, but I do think that's going to be probably the best way for us to be able to win this matchup. The deck is just so consistent in what it does. You really just need to be able to take away that Ziliax, and if you get that Ziliax away from him, the first one before it dies, then we should be able to handle the rest of the deck and go on to win from there. And you can see right here, we had a total of 31 games played, 58% win rate. And a little bit interesting to note here that going first, significantly better than going second. I don't think it should be that big of a gap. Obviously, 30 games is still a small sample size. Definitely better to be going first than second, but it's not going to be that drastic. Thank you for watching. I'm Uncorrupt, and good luck out on the ladder.